Let's take a look at the situation in parts of Europe where lockdown conditions are being eased in several countries, including France, Germany and Spain. Businesses are starting to reopen and children heading back to school. As countries enter new phases of dealing with the pandemic, governments are working out how they can balance giving people more freedom while continuing to limit the spread of the virus. Well, Spain's foreign minister spoke to the BBC about the gradual steps his country is now taking out of lockdown.
We start today. We hope to end by the 30th of June, and we'll walk through a gradual opening of social contacts, shops, businesses, and so on, but also asymmetric. Some parts of the country are in a better position to move faster than other parts of the country. Always looking at data related to the progression of the pandemic and data related to the capacity of our healthcare system to confront new cases. This is why we will do this gradually, responsibly, and with a lot of prudence, putting people and their health first.
Well, some hotels in Spain have been granted special permission to reopen, providing they follow strict social distancing guidelines. Here's one hotel manager in Madrid.
Health and safety measures are being taken, both for the employees and for the guests who come to the hotel, to ensure that everything will go smoothly. From when they enter, at the check-in area, there is safety distance, masks, disinfectant gel for both employees and customers, and there are some security screens to avoid any contact with the virus.
Well, France is starting to lift many of its restrictions after one of the longest lockdowns in Europe. Most shops and businesses have reopened after almost 2 months of lockdown. But there's been no rush to use public transport as large numbers of people continue to work from home. Our correspondent Hugh Schofield sent us this update from Paris.
After exactly 8 weeks of lockdown, this is what deconfinement means in Paris. In the cinemas, 2-month-old posters of films that have long been forgotten. On the Champs-Élysées, some traffic. At the Vuitton store, a small line of people. And in the metro, some coming and going with posters up saying that people have to wear masks and please avoid the rush hour. If Boris Johnson is looking to France for some kind of guidance about what it looks like to come out of lockdown on a given day set in advance as a deadline, then this is something of a clue. If you also tell people that they should really continue as far as possible to stay working from home and to come out only cautiously, then people will follow that, because this is not a big return to what it was like before. It's a very gradual, very partial return to activity.
Well, in Germany, politicians have expressed concern that conspiracy theories are helping fuel anti-lockdown protests seen over the weekend in several cities. Infections appear to be on the rise in Germany, just days after Chancellor Angela Merkel announced an easing of lockdown restrictions. For more on that, here's Jenny Hill in Berlin.
The news over the weekend is that the reproduction rate of the virus has risen above the value of 1. Statistically speaking, it means that for every person who has the virus, they'll pass it on to one other person. And it's being used by a lot of countries as a determining factor to see just how likely that virus is to spread exponentially. The general acceptance is below 1. The virus is under control. Above 1, it becomes a problem. It's risen above 1 twice over the weekend. On the face of it, you think that's cause for huge alarm. And yes, the government, scientists, experts are worried, but it is also worth pointing out that this reproduction rate is based on data which is relatively old, so it doesn't really reflect the situation at the moment. It's also a figure which tends to fluctuate a lot, and the scientists here say actually those fluctuations increase the lower the number of actual cases, and the number of new daily cases here is continuing to fall.
Well, let's turn to China now, where Disneyland has reopened in Shanghai. Here you can see people arriving there after a 4-month shutdown. Visitor numbers have been reduced to allow for social distancing, and people are having their temperature checked when they arrive. Other Disney theme parks around the world, though, remain closed. Well, this comes as China has seen declining virus cases for weeks and has been gradually easing restrictions. But the authorities are still working to stop further transmission of COVID-19 with some reported new cases. Here's a spokesperson from China's National Health Commission.
In the past 14 days, new confirmed local cases have been reported in 7 provinces and the number of local cluster infections continues to rise. We need to identify the source of the infections and their routes, trace and manage all close contacts, treat patients in isolation and keep them under observation. This way we can cut the transmission chain.
In Wuhan, where the COVID-19 outbreak is thought to have originated, 5 new locally transmitted cases of the virus have been confirmed, and in total 17 new cases were registered across China. That's the highest number in a fortnight. Our correspondent Robin Brandt has more on the situation in Wuhan.
There are 5 new cases being reported there. Apparently, this is around one housing compound, and apparently it's linked to an 89-year-old man who first fell ill with this new type of the virus back in March. He stayed at home, we're told, wasn't treated at hospital, but since then there have been a number of cases related to that compound in the double digits. And in the last 24 hours, we're seeing 5 new reported cases there at this single compound. So, Wuhan, remember the city that stayed in lockdown for 76 days. It's been open to the world for about a month now, but a spike there, a resurgence. The case number is very small, but nonetheless, it will be hugely concerning because it is new, fresh cases emerging domestically.
Well, let's speak to Jiaoyin Feng from the BBC's Chinese service in Washington. Good to see you. So, yeah, how concerning are these new cases?
It's quite concerning, in short. A week ago, China designated all regions in the country as low or medium risk for COVID-19. But now we are seeing all these small clusters of new cases in the country, including what we just mentioned, Wuhan, once the epicenter for the pandemic. It had not reported cases for over a month, but now the first small cluster emerged after the lockdown measures were lifted. And all of these related cases, they were previously classified as asymptomatic, meaning they were tested positive for the virus, but were not showing any clinical signs such as a cough or a fever. And now the Wuhan local authorities are currently closely monitoring hundreds of similar cases. And for the country of China, the rise of such hard to detect cases has sounded an alarm. The country says it's taking all measures to prevent the coronavirus from re-entering China from overseas and from re-emerging within the country by taking measures like ramping up contact tracing and testing efforts.
And Jiaoyin, just reassure us, what's the level of confidence that people have in the numbers, in the statistics coming out of China?
Well, we see the measures taken by the government right after all these new cases are reported. They're certainly on high alert. For example, other than Wuhan, in a city called Shulan, in northern China near the Russian border, there were also new reported cases, and the government immediately closed down all the public places like cinemas or gyms and libraries. And basically, people are back in lockdown again. So, like, all residents are ordered to stay at home except for absolutely necessary needs. And from these measures, you can tell the Chinese government is not trying to be too optimistic over the pandemic. The state broadcaster, Chinese Central Television, also interviewed an expert on infectious diseases. And the person said, the pandemic might drag on quite long in China. And if it's compared to SARS, we still know very little about COVID-19. So people should be prepared to fight a long and tough fight.
OK, thanks, Jiaoyin. Right, let's go to Russia now, where President Putin has announced a gradual lifting of coronavirus restrictions from Tuesday. That's despite a steady daily rise in the number of cases. Russia has registered a record increase of more than 11,000 cases in the past 24 hours and is now the 3rd most affected country in terms of infections. Here's Mr. Putin.
Starting from tomorrow, May 12th, the national period of non-working days will be over in all the country and for all sectors of the economy. But the fight against the epidemic is not over. The danger remains.
BBC Russia's Olga Ivshina has the details.
Well, first of all, Putin's speech doesn't mean that, quarantine restrictions would be lifted all over Russia. Situation is very much different across various regions of Russia. For example, in Moscow, where we see almost half of all cases in Russia, restrictions would continue till the 31st of May. In other regions, the situation is versatile. For example, in the Far East, in the Isle of Sakhalin, they have slightly more than 30 cases, and in some other places 50, in other places 1,000. And of course, those restrictions were very much different. Somewhere you had to send a message or get a special permission to leave your house. In some regions, you could more or less walk freely, but all the bars, restaurants and parks were closed. So this speech, these quarantine lifting measures come at a very strange time where a number of cases in Russia keep rising. Why is so? Well, Putin says that during those 6 weeks of self-isolation, Russian healthcare system had chance to prepare itself for the challenges of dealing with coronavirus, and now they are ready. Well, critics of the Kremlin say that that's not the case. Doctors are struggling, but it seems that Russian economy is struggling even more and more Russians are afraid that they'll lose their income, that they would have nothing to eat rather than they would get ill. Official numbers of unemployment across Russia have jumped twice, in certain cities up to 4 times, and experts say that real numbers could be even higher. Of course, in such situation, people care more about their income rather than about their health.
In Pakistan, the government has relaxed the lockdown after almost 2 months, enabling small markets to open ahead of Eid. With shops now packed and social distancing rules being flouted, many fear a sharp increase in the spread of the virus. BBC's Shumaila Jafri has this report from Islamabad.
While Pakistan is expecting a peak in coronavirus cases in the coming weeks, the government has announced to ease the lockdown from May 9th in different phases. As Eid al-Fitr is approaching, in the first phase, shops and small markets in localities have been allowed to operate. And since the restrictions have been lifted, markets in all major cities of Pakistan are buzzing with shoppers who are preparing for Eid. But the concern here is that most of these shoppers are openly flouting social distancing guidelines set up by the government. In this situation, many fear that non-compliance of citizens can trigger exponential growth of COVID-19 cases in the country. The government has repeatedly warned that lockdown with even more restrictions could return anytime if the number of coronavirus cases spikes up. Prime Minister Imran Khan has also repeatedly explained how Pakistan is caught between devil and the deep blue sea, and he has said that if he doesn't allow small businesses to restart, the country's economy won't be able to cope with the crisis that the COVID-19 has already triggered.
In Iran, all mosques have reopened today. The Islamic Propagation Organization says the decision was made following discussions with the health minister after the recent suggestion by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. BBC Persian's Rana Raminpour has the latest on the situation there.
So according to the Health Ministry of Iran, the total number of deaths so far, it's 6,685 confirmed deaths, and more than 109,000 people have contracted the virus. But despite this, they say that from the end of the month of Ramadan, all the religious places, restaurants and hairdressers will reopen, but they will have to observe social distance policies. On top of that, we are receiving reports from the province of Khuzestan in south of Iran, and we hear that it's still a red zone. The province of Khuzestan is very poor, very deprived, and it's unclear how many tests are being done there. And that's why many observers are worried about a second wave and underreported cases all across Iran.